Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I am so excited for today's episode because we are joined by an incredible guest and fellow entrepreneur that, I'll tell you what, we hear from all of you listeners so frequently, and I personally hear it from so many entrepreneurs about how they feel like they have a story to tell inside of them. Well, today's guest is going to get you even more inspired to start writing and telling that story in so many different ways. So let me introduce you to her. Her name is Janice Buswell. Janice is a multi-talented communicator, speaker. She's a novelist. She's also the author of The Radical Simplicity and A Good Word blogs, and she's the co-founder of the Experience Writing Conference, which I think is so cool. To tease you a little bit about what that is, Experience Writing is a conference and community designed to help writers discover or recover their God-given voice and to navigate their writing, editing, and publishing process in a way that maximizes their uniqueness instead of losing it, which, trust me, the publishing process is easy to lose yourself and lose sight of that in order to make their story stronger than ever before. I'm so excited for all of us to look inward in today's episode from and through an incredible guide that has such a brilliant mind when it comes to all of these things. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Janice Buswell. All right, Janice, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So glad to be here. I was so excited when you reached out and I've learned about who you are, I'm like, this is awesome. Entrepreneurs need a lot of encouragement. It can be a hard, lonely road. And so I was just super excited to see what you did and that you're out there doing it. So thank you.
Heck yes. Oh, I'm so appreciative of those kind words, Janice, and you are absolutely correct. So one of our founding principles behind this show is a rising tide lifts all boats. And I think we all need that in all of our journeys because let's face it, there's enough challenges in this life. We should always lift each other up. And you are such a shining example of that. So I'm going to throw the spotlight directly on you for you to take us beyond the bio. Who's Janice? How did you start doing all these cool things?
So I started the story started probably when I was young, and I always kind of had a proclivity for writing, but I really didn't like it because I was a perfectionist and very nervous of making mistakes, but my mom kind of pushed me. And I finally, about high school, started to write in earnest and enjoy it when I could start to see just the power of story to communicate ideas and truth and lift people up because, they're wide open and relaxed when they come to stories, whether movies or books. And it's just a great way to impart wisdom and those kinds of things. And so I started writing then and then took like a 15-year hiatus from the story I'd started writing until I felt just moved. I did a lot of things in between. I worked for a tech startup. So I got to get kind of into the nitty-gritty of what it looks like to start things up without having to be the one starting it up. Lots of valuable lessons there. And then I worked as a graphic designer for a ministry in town, and I was a communications director after that for an overseas group that worked in Africa. They're doing amazing work. And it wasn't until like 15 years later that I finally got back around to my story. So I was telling other people's stories a lot and helping them learn how to tell their own stories better. You had a little stint in Uganda teaching people to write like news style Western stories Western style news stories so they could communicate to partners over here and tell the amazing work they were doing in their own tongue with their own heart, which is always more powerful when people can tell their own stories rather than having me tell it for them. So after all that, helping other people learn how to tell their stories, I finally wrote my own. And in the process of writing and getting integrated, I found that you really can't. It's like anything in life. You can't be an entrepreneur alone. Turns out you can't finish a book alone. And after the first draft, I slowly started as I was revising, started getting integrated into like writers groups and attended a conference. And that's where I met my editor and got the first, I had some beta readers, got some first professional feedback from her. And that really threw me for a loop because I'd had a very strong purpose for my books. not everybody has a strong purpose when they write. Some people write for fun, but some people kind of have what I call a burning story on their hearts. And I had a burning story on my heart, and her feedback, the interesting thing I found, it was good feedback. I ended up using like 90% of all the critique she gave me, and it was like a 16-page document of critique. So it was quite a bit. But really learning how to apply that well, and not, I almost kind of destroyed my story taking her advice, not because it was bad, but because I hadn't learned how to hear the heart of what she was saying at first and contextualize it into what my story was about. So like, if she said, this is the problem, this is how you fix it, she was 9 times out of 10 right about what the problem was. But as I learned from her, only you know your story, and the how to fix it might have to be entirely different. So it was a big wrestling process for me, this whole point, going through the book toward publishing. Finally published it, and I was still kind of running in writer circles, still doing some writing and starting on maybe sequels to the duology. And I met a lot of people. I happened to meet my neighbor, Mark, who's 2 doors down from me, and it turns out he's a writer too. And he came up to me one day and he said, Janice, I've been praying, and I think God wants me to start a Christian Writers Conference. Would you want to start a Christian Writers Conference with me? And I was like, okay, you start a Christian Writers Conference. And so we dove in. And the idea of helping people connect to the heart of God to really understand their unique story so that they could write that with confidence and know how to navigate the process on the way. And so we started, and we were, it's a startup. And the first year was intense, but it was good because everything was fresh. All the legal, all the practical, all the communications, all the things. And we ended up, for that first year, we did a 4-day conference at a destination with 5 speakers and like all the breakouts and all these activities and catering and all the things. And 10 people showed up, which I because I had history with startups and all that before, I wasn't shocked. And I knew this year was probably not going to be like a grand financial success, and it wasn't. But the wonderful thing, though, was that the 10 people who came, it was also in my heart that it would be a all ages Christian Writers Conference, because I think a motivated 12-year-old can learn anything that an adult can. And sometimes, kids who really have a gift for writing and a heart for writing, helping them understand their voice early and their unique message can really help set them up for success as they're trying to learn all the different craft aspects of writing. So all that to say, we had, 10 people come. Half of them came up from McKinney, Texas. And the writers who came, I counted the event as a success because the ones who came, you could tell they really got what they needed. And to me, that was the whole thing that I was just so excited about. And one of the writers started writing her first book. She's in process of it now still. And the other writer, these are the adult writers, because it was mostly kids that first time, which is also fascinating. And the other adult writer, she started her coaching. She started coaching other writers. She published a few books. She's published a lot more now. She's been coaching. And so I was personally ecstatic for the first year. But then I was thrown a little bit of a curveball when my co-founder, Mark, and he's a dear friend, but he came up to me and said, I think I'm done. I think I just was here for the first year and now it's yours. And I was like, I think you're wrong. Please keep praying. And I think you're wrong. But he agreed. He said he wasn't going to help at all with the next conference. He did agree to let me bounce ideas off of him from time to time. But that next year, it was me and God and my husband helped a lot with the logistics, execution, but all the ideas, all that. And that was an intense year. But when I'd been going around cold calling the first year, I'd happened to come across on a snowy day when most people aren't out driving in Oklahoma. I was out driving and I knocked on the door of a man who trains students, kids, school-age kids in technical writing. And I'd kind of pitched to him the conference saying, do you have any students who want to come? Because I thought it was a lovely compliment. The technical writing would then help with the creative writing. And he was very kind and warm. I found out later he's like a big conference speaker himself and puts on conferences and travels to conferences and has helped just hundreds of school-age kids. And he said, yeah, I'll recommend this to my students and tell me how it goes after it's done, the event. Just let me know how it goes. I'm like, okay. So I showed up afterwards, and he told me, he said, you know, when you walked in here, I could tell you were very passionate about helping writers. But other than that, I really had no idea what you were talking about or what you do. I was like, that is very good feedback. Thank you. And he proceeded to give me an hour and a half of his time and all this feedback about how to improve the conference. And so we moved it in town, made it 2 days, did 4 speakers, just lots of different things, created a unique selling proposition, you know, to communicate better what the purpose of experience writing is and all these things. And then the next year, we had 41 attendees. And so since then, we've had a consistent 30 to 40 attendees each year. This year will be the 5th year. It runs in June. And it's just been an exciting journey. So that's how I got into it.
Janice, I so love that backstory. I love how it came to be. And I love the fact that with that intention and with consistency, obviously experience writing is doing big things in this world now. And I'm going to call this out because truth be told, Janice, when we invited you on the show, it's for a partly selfish reason, is the fact that writing changed my life in so many different ways. And so all the things that you said about the podcast at the top of today's episode, this podcast only exists, in fact, because of the book my first book that I published in 2015, which was called Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur. And I was in my mid-20s at the time, but I had started my first business all the way back in 2008 as a 19-year-old. And so, Janice, I felt like I had stories to tell from the things that I had learned going from Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur. And I remember how many people at that time were planting seeds of doubt is the kindest way that I'll phrase it here on the air, Janice. So people were saying, oh, why are you going to write that book about entrepreneurship? Aren't there other books about entrepreneurship? And my answer at the time, which, you know, I was a young, naive 20-something-year-old, my answer was, and in hindsight, I realized there was an ounce of wisdom in it, was, well, yeah, there is, but nobody's ever written it the way that I can write it because only I can write it this way. Only I have my stories. And I remember how many people would ask me about it saying, oh, you think you figured everything out in entrepreneurship? And my answer unequivocally, and still to this day, many years later, was absolutely not. I don't believe anyone has. But I want to bring in a conversation that you and I had off the air. I want to bring it onto the air because I think the most powerful breakthrough that I had that encouraged me and inspired me to sit down and write that book, which obviously a year later sparked this podcast, which we've been able to reach people in over 150 countries, is the fact that I realized I don't know the answers, but I do know my stories and I do know my experiences, and other people are going to read my stories and experience it however they need to. They're going to see themselves in that story. Talk to us about that, because you and I are talking in front of a global entrepreneurial audience right now that don't view themselves as writers like you did. Don't view themselves as writers. Like I always wanted to be a writer when I grew up because my youngest uncle was a journalist. And so I'd love for you to step into that and share with other entrepreneurs why this stuff matters. Why writing? What's the power of telling those stories?
The power of telling, story is actually the primary way that all people learn. You can go back thousands of centuries, and story was the primary way that people shared information, shared their values, shared history, their shared history, shared new ideas. And you can even see this in the surge of like all these business books that have this kind of narrative style where they're weaving business truths in kind of a loose narrative. And even, Jesus, even he taught in stories. So many great teachers, everyone has taught through stories for a long time. And so story's important, and it's even more important now. I liked what you said, Brian, because no one's told it like you have, and that's true. And it used to be that culture in different geographic regions was very homogenized, like in the past, the US would have had a pretty homogenous culture, and one story would hit 90% of the people. Or, in Europe, it had a pretty homogenous culture, and one story would hit 90% of the people. But now we do not have a homogenous culture anymore. And it's so important. This is why I love helping new writers, is that, yeah, there may be a million kinds of versions of this kind of story, but no one will say it the way you said it. And the way you said it is the way that someone else needs to hear it. In all these subcultures, no one else may say it that way to them. And so the power of story, I think, is more important than ever before, and many voices telling stories, because many people need to be reached with different information, whether it's with encouragement for their personal lives or encouragement as an entrepreneur or, what have you. And so it's so important that people not discount themselves and the story they feel like is on their heart, because if it's there, there's probably a good reason for you to tell it that you may or may not ever know. But I would absolutely encourage you to tell the story.
Yeah, well, Janice, this is so much fun having you on the air, because I want to go deeper into that level of identity. And here's why. You so comfortably embrace that title of I'm a writer. And I love the fact that you called out from young ages, if we can get kids to embrace writing, then they grow up with that belief. And that's totally me. I mean, I dedicated my first book to that uncle who's a journalist, because I saw the fact that his words were read by people all over the world. He literally spread the news as a journalist in ways that my family, I come from an immigrant family, so I don't know what's going on in Albania. Like, my uncle was boots on the ground, and he was sharing with the world what was happening there. And I think that that's so important. So I grew up with that belief. I want to be a writer. It was easy for me to step into that. But Janice, how many people are out there that don't give themselves permission to step into that label, who separate themselves from that identity? And that's the thing that holds them back. Whereas I think some of the most brilliant lessons that I've learned in business are from a guy who owns a local painting company, that he's told me stories and shared lessons with me that doesn't matter that he's not a quote unquote writer. It matters that he has something to share. So Janice, how do we address the identity part of what it is that we all need to embrace?
Well, the identity part is interesting, because there are writers I know who've come to my conference, because I say it's for new writers, although I've had a couple friends who are not new writers say, you got to stop saying that, because I'm not a new writer and I'm enjoying your conference. I'm like, okay. But the interesting thing is, these not new writers, these writers have been writing for years, the kind of insecurities that I've seen some of them struggle with as writers, being like, oh, I don't know if it's good enough. I don't know this and that. And I'm like, you have been writing for a while. You're a fantastic writer. I even had a conversation with a dear friend once who was wrestling over this thought of whether or not she should write. And I was like, you should absolutely write, because you are where everyone who's ever wanted to write or had an idea wishes they were. Like, you're at that level that other people are trying to attain, so you better write. And I think identity is like, we forget the importance of you, the uniqueness of you, and how much the world actually needs that. They need what's in you. That's why you're here on the earth, is because there's something in you that the world needs. And I go so far even to say that I really haven't ever met an unimportant person. I think every person is meant to be a leader in something. And it might not be a leader of like a massive organization, but everybody's called to lead somewhere, because there's something in them that needs to come out, that's needed by other people. Just like we need other people to help call the things out of us. If we're the only one just receiving from others, there's a point in which we need to be the one who shares that thing that's on our heart too. And that uniqueness that's designed to help call others up. And helping people past that, I think it's really once they recognize they've been created uniquely for a purpose, for this specific time and place, and that's why they're here on Earth. And that's actually what last year's conference was about, primarily.
Janice, I want to push you further there because I feel like this is the stuff that I don't think we have this conversation publicly enough. And huge kudos to you that you do bring this to light in your conferences. But I personally experienced this in my early 20s when I was getting burnt out with my work, and I was just, in my hometown in central Massachusetts, and I felt like I was having a bit of an identity crisis because what had I done up to that point? I had a 4-year degree, I had a mountain of student loan debt, I was frustrated with my professional career that it wasn't going as quickly as that I hoped it was, and I just felt like your average nondescript dude in central Massachusetts where I was like, I don't know who wants to listen to me. And so it takes people around us, and Janice, that's why I'm grateful for amazing guests like you coming here on the air on this show. It takes incredible voices and people who find the awesome in others, such as yourself, to sometimes invite us to look within and believe in ourselves again. So what does that process look like when you guide people through that? Because it's not that you're magically giving them something, it's that you're helping them recognize something within them. So how the heck do you do that, Janice? Because that's big and important work.
So a couple things. It's interesting. First of all, I always start by praying because, God is the one who made people. And when I'm coaching people, I may have just met this person. The chances that on my own, I will be able to know what they need is probably small. So I start by praying, asking for his wisdom because he made everybody. And then helping them kind of understand that you were designed for a purpose by God. And then when I pray, I really dig into their why, because the why is so important. The why is like the foundation of everything. And I've taught just about that in individual classes several times. Like I ask them why they want to write, what's on their heart, who do they hope to reach with what they write, and how do they think it will change their lives? And as I kind of ask them those questions, and I just ask and listen a lot and hear what they say, then I try to just kind of pay special attention to discern those moments when they get, where you can see them come alive as they talk about it, and see, trying to identify the threads too of where what they say they want to write about has intersected with their life. Because a lot of times, even fiction writers, they end up writing from their life and from their experience. Because people say write from your experience, but honestly, you can write a crazy, far out world about, that no one's ever seen before. But when you're writing honestly and writing the story that's really in you from your unique voice, your life experience will bubble up through those pages, whether it's wisdom or perspectives or whatever it is. And so helping people identify those unique things that are bubbling up in the process is really what I love doing, and helping them see maybe what, because this is the interesting thing. All our lives have a story too, and there's a really neat exercise. I did not come up with the exercise. My husband introduced me to it. He was a coach, kind of a Christian life coach for a little bit, and he still is doing it a little bit. But he found this exercise called Your Life Story, where you go through and you basically find out what the story is of your life. You take a bunch of sticky notes, usually in 2 different colors, and you write down every significant moment in your life that you can think of. Positive ones, like on yellow maybe, and negative ones on pink. And then you go back through, you kind of put them in order, and you notice what are called hinge moments, those events that were not just significant, but after that happened, nothing was quite the same in your life ever again, whether for good or for bad. Because those hinge moments are what show you, they delineate the chapters of your story. And once you organize them based on those hinge moments, your life into chapters, you can begin to see the themes of the different chapters of your life. And then you can kind of see the overarching theme sometimes of your whole life, as you span. And that can be powerful then for you as a writer to see how your life has been woven together by God, and then to see and purposefully bring that into the stories you're telling, or sometimes just let it be. Because as you said, sometimes it's not that people don't know what to write, but they're just afraid to let themselves write the thing that they actually want to say. They're afraid it might not be marketable, it might not be this, might not be that. But the thing is, no one who ever wrote a real masterpiece ever sat down and really was worried about, all the industry standards and all these things. And those aren't bad. But the real powerful writing comes from people writing from their heart and getting that out there. And then taking all the rules and all the things you learn about craft and structure and using it to accentuate what's the unique story that you have. And so I don't know if that answered your question. My mind kind of went.
No, it absolutely answers the question. And in fact, I'm going to use, I love tangents and I love segues, and I'm just going to step into that and embrace it here on the air, because Janice, where my head goes, and I'm sure a lot of listeners' minds go, is, and I know we are not talking about tech today and we're not explicitly talking about AI, but I'm going to interject it here because obviously AI is a tool now that we can use. And speaking of tangents, I often, Janice, I have very non-linear thoughts. There are many days where whoever's around me, apologies to friends and family, because oftentimes I just want to be like, can I just talk for 20 minutes and it's probably going to make no sense. But I also know that the process of simply saying things out loud, it will start to make sense. To me, that's step one. And I'm so grateful for the impact of AI these days, because I can just go on as many tangents as I want. And I can say, this is what my typical prompts end as, Janice, where I say, what do you see? Or what do you think? Or thoughts? Or how can I organize this? And it's really helpful to have at least an idea partner to bounce things off of. From your perspective, how's AI impacting all this stuff? Because I know how much uniqueness is at the core of what it is that you do. So obviously we want to preserve our uniqueness. So what's your take on AI as a tool there?
I'm really glad you asked that, because that's something I've given some thought to ever since AI came out. And the thing is, AI can be a great tool for, like, as your personal assistant to help you do those menial tasks, or it can help with research, especially if you're in writing in a genre or in a even nonfiction work that requires a lot of research. AI can help with that. You better double check it, because sometimes it hallucinates. But it can help for those kinds of tasks. But I strongly encourage writers, especially new writers, not to have AI help you with your writing, because it gets in the way of you really discovering your voice, because the way you discover your voice is actually through writing. So the more you have help with the writing, now if you're just technical writing, that's a different thing. But if you're writing and want to become an author, whether that's in nonfiction or fiction, I encourage people to set AI aside for the actual writing, go through the work of writing their first drafts on their own, and sharing them with people, learning some craft things, and working with that, because that's really how you're going to learn who you are. Because you even said, sometimes we don't know what we're thinking until it comes out. And in the same way, we don't know our own voice sometimes and our own message until it comes out, because every idea starts as in seed form. And like even my story, when I wrote my duology that I published, I started it before college, and I just had this germ of an idea that I wanted to share truth with people. And so I had like these young people on a quest for truth. I'm like, woohoo, this is my big why. And as I wrote, I wrote 30 pages, paused it for 15 years. And when I came back, I had a lot more perspective for one. And so I was able to write the characters who were based on some people I knew at the time. And I was able to write it with much greater empathy and depth and realisticness. And I could see now that the purpose of my writing as it grew, it was then I wanted not just the truth, people to see the truth, but I wanted them to find, because I found as I wrote, I found out things about myself in my own life. Like I found myself in my fictional story in my life. I'm like, whoa, this is wild. And I wanted other people to be able to find themselves in my story. And so my why, my voice, my purpose had grown. It hadn't changed, but it had matured through the act of writing. And then as I grew further, I went from just, most people kind of find a niche, like I want to write for this kind of audience or that kind of audience. Through the feedback I was getting, I realized, actually my heart is for this particular kind of story. I actually wanted to have a wide spread. This story needs to go wide for me to hit, this kind of reader, old readers, young readers, male, female. I even want to get non-readers who say they don't read, but really just don't like most books. And so that developed my voice in the way I wrote further. And but it was through the process of writing and through the process of having people read and give feedback that I discovered these things about myself and discovered these things about the story I was writing. So the process is what teaches you. And I feel like if you use AI to help with the writing itself, especially as a new writer, it can short circuit your discovery of your voice, although it has many other uses that can help you, along the way. Because even spell check really is AI. But
Janice, I am so grateful that you shared all that with us. And I want to echo that for listeners, because people ask me a lot for podcasting advice. And the thing that probably my least favorite thing to hear from people thinking about starting a podcast is they're like, oh, well, I'm going to wait to start my podcast because I need to find my voice. I don't know what my angle is going to be. And I'm just like, well, that happens on the air. And they're just like, well, no, you're natural. Like, it was easy for you. It's like, no, it wasn't. Go listen to my first 10 episodes. They were horrendous, but it took those first 10 episodes and 100 episodes and 500 episodes for me to start to figure it out. Nobody ever got better at riding a bike by just reading about riding a bike. You actually have to sit your seat in the bike, and you have to sit your butt in the bike seat, and you have to fall, and you have to pedal, and you have to figure out balance. But you said it, the process, that is the way that you learn. I'm so appreciative of the way that you've shared that and called that out for listeners. And Janice, I'm really excited to see how you answer this final question, because it's the one that I ask at the end of every episode, and it's super broad. You can take it in any direction, and that is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of their own growth journeys, and knowing that you are one of us, you're a fellow entrepreneur, what's that one thing that you want to leave them with today?
Actually, it might feel like a totally aside from what we're talking, but it's, to me, what I want to leave entrepreneurs with, or anyone trying to accomplish anything on earth, is that it's really all about relationships. I said earlier that no one writes a book on their own, but I think there's kind of this idea, the mystique of a writer who goes alone into a cabin in the woods and doesn't come out, but just until they've churned out brilliance. And it never happens that way. The writing is the process of finding your voice, and part of that process is really having other people come into it with you, whether that's beta readers, whether that's going to writers groups, whether that's learning every part of the way. Even the fact, like, my husband was like the one who helped me finish my first draft. He would just read a little bit, whatever I wrote that day, he'd read it. And I told him, because the thing, when you're doing your first draft, I don't allow feedback on my first draft, constructive criticism, because, a story or an idea is kind of like a child to me. The first 9 months, you cannot access it. It's just forming, and it comes out. And then you start training, you dress, you clean, you train, you learn to feed, you learn to do all the things, and they grow and mature. Same with a story. So I said, don't tell me if you don't like it. Just tell me if you do like it. And once the first draft's done, then you can give me your feedback. And he just encouraged me. His encouragement was actually huge in writing the first draft, which did have some serious revisions later. But just getting it out there, I had to have his encouragement along the way. And then I started, reaching out, having other people I knew read it, started going, just meeting people. Because, you never know who you'll meet. At the writers group, at the writers conference, that's how I met the lady who said, oh, your book is ready now to go to a professional editor. Take it now. And the conference was where I met my professional editor, who was a perfect person to edit my book. And really, this principle applies to entrepreneurship as well. Because even in the conference, honestly, the way it's grown and the way it's worked into what it is today has all been through relationships. And so I just encourage, there can be a lot of things in entrepreneurship, a lot of polls for your attention and this and that, and things that you have to do. But don't let that squeeze out the need to develop relationships, especially key relationships that you can see have been brought specially into your life for that. And don't overlook those happenstance relationships that you might not know what would come of them, but taking the time to really connect with people wherever you go, I think is really important to the growth of any organization or any entrepreneur. So.
Yes, I love that piece of advice for our listeners, Janice. I always view it's almost like you're talking about serendipity in a way of like, you have to be open to all of that. Some of the most incredible connections that I've had in my life were the totally unplanned one. And I think it's important for us to leave that space open, allow ourselves to experience those things. And it's so well said. And I love the fact that it applies both to the writing process and us stepping into that. But you're right. You just dropped some entrepreneurial wisdom on us. And I'm so grateful for that. And I am a huge fan of all the work that you're doing with the Experience Writing Conference. And I know that you have so many other cool things going on. You just launched a 6-week small group study for writers called Grace for the Writer's Journey. You've got so many cool things going on, Janice. So for listeners who are thinking, wow, I want to go deeper here, I want to give myself permission to dip my toes into the water, Janice, where should listeners go from here? How can they find all this cool stuff that you're up to?
So the main website, if you want to connect with me, especially regarding writing, is through expwriting.com, short for experience writing. So that's expwriting.com. And if you go to the About page, you can connect with me through there, or you can find me on Facebook, Janice Buswell. And I always love to help new writers. At the moment, I even like the conference is its own thing, but I like to, if you just have questions about writing and want some help, if I can help you, I will. And I just do that for free. Just call me up, shoot me an email, say, I have this question, and I'm happy to help. As you know, if I can do it, I'll do it, because I've been there. So many people who just poured into me without, not for money. So I love to do that when I can. So feel free to connect to me through EXP Writing. Experience Writing is also on Facebook, just Experience Writing. And I'm on Facebook as Janice Buswell. So.
Yes, and listeners, you already know we're dropping those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode. So super easy for you to find all this amazing stuff that Janice is doing. And Janice, I am so appreciative of how kind and generous you are with our audience and with everybody, of course. You are such a shining example of our founding motto of a rising tide lifts all boats. So listeners, definitely check out those links down below. If you're on the go, if you're driving, please don't try to take notes. You can always click right through from the show notes. So Janice, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
You're welcome. It's been an honor.